So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged, and this is something quite different actually, because we've had battle replays in the past that sort of mimic a battle event that happened in the past in the Lord of the Rings lore, but we've never had a historical scenario that is effectively a recreation of a battle that happened in real life, which is what this is. And a good amount of thought has actually gone into this, actually, considering the rules in place, because this is a recreation of the Battle of Alessia, which I suppose the easiest way to explain what it is, it's the battle between the Romans and the Gauls, which resulted in Julius Caesar building a fortress around an existing one in order to try and starve them out. So quite an iconic battle, to say the least, and the part of the Romans today will be played by Numenor, and the part of the Celts will be played by the Rohan, well, the Rohirrim, I should say. So quite an interesting concept, this. Of course, through the lens of Lord of the Rings, it's going to be quite interesting to see who comes out on top between Rohan and Numenor. Now, in a siege-type environment, you would probably give the edge to Numenor, but having said that, of course, it's quite an interesting layout that we have, because both sides effectively have the ability to be on the attack and the defence throughout the course of this battle, because initially Rohan will have to be the ones attacking, because the Celts up here on the hill must sally out and try and attack the fortifications that Numenor have built, as all of the surrounding Rohirrim armies will also move in to try and take over this position that Numenor hold. Later on in the battle, however, a maximum of 20 units can fall back up to the hill over here, so if the assault does not go very well for Rohan, they can then pull back and try and instead be on the defence. So it'll be interesting to see how the battle develops. Now, artillery on the Rohan side of things is only allowed to use the standard shot. Artillery on the Numenor side of things are allowed to use half of their ammunition as flaming shot on their stuff like their trebuchets here, which is significant, of course, because flaming shot is substantially better at killing off blobs. But of course, impossible to know how well that was policed. I'm sure that everyone did follow the rules, but yes, we shall have to wait and see. So, for Numenor, who we may as well go through first, I know that we normally go through attackers first and defenders second, but considering that will probably be the case for both in this battle today, we'll just go through the ones that I'm looking at right now. Starting off with Numenor, who do actually have a few units from outside their factions, including a couple of Umbar units and a couple of units from Mordor, which is quite interesting. So the victory conditions for the Numenorians: if they can defeat the 3 external Rohirrim armies that are going to be closing in on their fortifications, they gain a minor victory. Major victory is if they're able to completely defeat the Rohirrim. So that should be quite interesting. So back here we do have the Temple Executioners. You can see that they do actually have, interestingly, the brass armour effects from Numenor, rather than the sort of the metal grey effect from Mordor. So it's interesting that that model is still in the game, actually. But yes, the upgraded Temple Executioners. We have the Royal Legion of Armenelos, obviously really, really strong. Certainly from an infantry perspective, you would expect the Numenorians to be far stronger than the Rohirrim, which kind of fits considering they're playing the part of the Romans against the Celts here. Numenorian cohort, really strong line infantry units. Seafarers, we have Naru Sentinels as the pikes, as well as Belagaia pikes. Numenorian cohort obviously going to be really, really dominant on a frontline fight. We have Naru Royal Guard. Again, in archery terms, you would expect Numenor to have a decent advantage, although ammunition wise they may actually struggle a little bit here. Most of their archers don't have that much ammunition other than the Belagaia. Seafarers are over here. They have some more seafarers, lots of javelins, of course, a trebuchet. Numenorian cohort, Numenorian shield guard, and some Belagaia archers. So Lango is obviously one of the Numenorian players here. Shield guard and cohort guarding this way in. Steel bowmen. We have Marshal of the Gar, who's going to be playing as some more seafarers. A little bit, this shouldn't be a map which crashes, because while there are quite a few fences, then there's not enough on the map in a wide spanning sense that I think we have to worry too much about that. Belagaia pikemen over here, another trebuchet, some Royal Legion of Armenelos, very narrow choke point here in the middle with some shield guard, some cohort, some steel bowmen, some cohorts over here, seafarers, so very similar armies. Obviously Pharazim Swordmasters, incredibly powerful, Numenorian cohort, but yeah, definitely all of these Numenorian armies have a certain theme to them. Lots of seafarers, there are actually some Adunai shadow bows there as well, but also lots of cohort and shield guard, and a few elite units like Naru and some of the Pharazim and Armenelos units also mixed in. Eclipse 2500 playing as another Numenorian army. Naryn Iron Royal Guard and a Trebuchet. Seafarers are over here as well. More Royal Guard. Yeah, I mean, the Royal Guard do actually have quite a lot of ammunition. It's not often you see this many of them, so certainly in a skirmish fight they should be very, very dominant against anything Rohan can throw at them. Naryn Iron Sentinels once again. More pikes, more cohort. More cohort over here. Similar to on the other side, there's actually Temple Guard, so AP arrows, albeit in greater quantities than the Steel Bowmen will be able to provide, and some Royal Legion of Armenelos as well. There is also some cavalry over here in the trees, as we have a look for them. You can see some Numenorian vanguard, so the spear cavalry for Numenor, previously the Romena Cariberim, of course. They'll be a little bit better off the charge, and of course we have some sword cavalry, some Elcarondas faithful, of course an Umbar unit, and some Pharazim nobles, a mixture of the different players here with their units, Numenorian vanguard over here as well. So, a bit of cavalry that can be used later on. Now, we shall have a little look at the Rohirrim. Starting off with Mr. Sneakman over here, he's got some Eastmark Spearmen. They are probably more so the attackers than the defenders this time around, to be honest, because there are more of them, and from the start they will be the ones to sort of attack the quote-unquote Roman fortification, and that may very well colour the battle as a whole pretty significantly. Riddermark Spearmen. Spears like this, I mean the Westmark Spears in particular are actually pretty good, but I'm not sure how well they're actually going to be able to perform against all of this heavy Numenor infantry. They will probably struggle to make that much of an impression, to be honest with you, but they will at least mean the Rohan front line shouldn't fall apart too quickly. Eastmark Axemen, obviously lower end line infantry units. Stuff like this though, the Riddermark Axemen, so the armour piercing core of Rohan is going to be absolutely vital for them making any sort of, or gaining any purchase really, on the lines of the Numenorians. They are of course vulnerable to arrows, but yeah, that AP damage they can do is going to be absolutely vital, as of course is the really high base damage coming from the Shield Maidens of Rohan. Yeah, they're going to have to be doing quite a lot of the heavy lifting against some of the really entrenched Numenorians. The problem is, of course, if the Numenorians are able to get their shields in the way, the amount of damage they'll actually be able to do is going to be fairly limited. Helm's Hammers, one of the few units that the Numenorians would rightly fear from Rohan today, because obviously they've got a huge amount of AP damage and they're very difficult to kill with ranged units as well, given their humongous shield value. Eastmark Spearmen and Riddermark Spearmen there. More Eastmarks, more Riddermarks a little bit further back here. You can see some Riddermark Archers as well as some more Axemen, both Eastmark and Riddermark. So obviously some Archers, but they're going to be definitely overpowered by the kind of units they're going to be facing off against. Westmark Infantry, they should perform okay, to be honest with you. They're obviously no match for something like the Numenorian cohort in a straight up fight, but they should perform okay. They'll definitely do better than the litany of spears that Rohan will have at their disposal today. Medicel Guard, another really important unit for Rohan here, because their javelins are obviously going to do a lot of damage, as well as them being very strong in melee. Westmark Marshals, probably the single best unit that, or one of the best units to be honest, that Rohan can bring against these heavily armoured factions that technically can outperform them in terms of sheer skill. And there's some Arid of ALDBERG around here as well, which primarily are actually going to have to be used defensively, I think, when the Numenor cavalry is unleashed upon them. Why are we playing Rome on Med is the player name. I wonder if this is blindness. I wonder. Well, it may be. We've got some Eastmark Spearmen, more Eastmark Spearmen, some Eastmark Axemen. We have got some Riddermark Axemen back here, as well as some more Riddermark Archers, some Westmark Spearmen over there, Westmark Spears, Shield Maidens of Rohan, Riddermark Spears, Westmark Infantry back here. We get into some of the slightly more serious stuff, like the Westmark Infantry, the Helm's Hammers, a catapult which of course can only use its rock projectiles, so it's not going to be quite so devastating. Westmark Marshals, a little bit more accurate though, so swings and roundabouts. Helmengas should be, that's actually a decent addition because they'll be better in a skirmish fight. Westmark Marshals, Eastmark units, and some Riddermark Axemen at the back. Heading over to the other side, near the red line, we have Engsfit. He's got a catapult. I'd imagine these armies out here are relatively similar. Yeah, Helm's Hammers, Westmarks, Westmark Infantry, Eastmark Axemen, some Shield Maidens of Rohan, Eastmark Spears, Westmark Spears. See the catapult, Medicel Guard, Riddermark Axemen and Archers, some Eastmark Axemen. They also have some Riddermark Cavalry. Not quite as strong as the Arid, but once again, they will almost certainly be used entirely defensively. Westmark Spearmen are over there, Westmark Infantry, Eastmarks, Riddermarks, and some Riddermark Axemen as well. And then within the settlement itself, there's a couple of armies up here, I believe. Yeah, Inarius, and I think it's Viper Action is up here as well. Yes, indeed it is. Riddermark Axemen, Westmarks, Westmark Marshals, Westmark Infantry. And then we have some Riddermark Spears as well. Helmingas, some civilians. The civilians, I believe, are the only units that are permitted to stay within the settlement up here to represent the people that actually lived in the town. But also, they count towards the total units they're allowed to fall back here, which actually is not a good thing for the Rohirrim, because you'd rather be able to retreat some units that are actually a little bit better. So the civilians do eat into the 20 unit limit they have when they're allowed to pull back here to the central settlement. Catapult up on the hill, which actually has a perfect position. I mean, that you would imagine has to stay up here and just fire down. If it has to charge forward like the rest of them, that'd be a little bit odd. More Westmarks over here. Again, the Shield Maidens of Rohan are going to be very important, as are the Helm's Hammers and more Westmark Marshals. A lot of Westmark Marshals up here, actually, so perhaps the greatest threat to Numenor in terms of quality actually comes from within rather than without. I will make a little bit of a cut here because I'm not sure how long it will take before the Rohirrim start moving towards the settlement and how long it is before the sally out begins. But as soon as it does, we'll rejoin and we'll get things underway. So we appear to have some movement as some of the Rohirrim start to make their way down the hill. A combination of Riddermark Spears, some Helmingas as well, and some Riddermark Axemen. So yeah, we're going to see the emptying of this central area begin. Interestingly enough, going for just the standard shot on the trebuchet right away, even though I think they are permitted to actually use the flaming shot for half their ammunition. But they did still score some hits. They could have actually been really devastating if they used the flaming shot, actually. Around the other side, they're not quite moving down that way just yet. But we can see Engsvitz moving forward with these Mark Spears. Very low-end spears, of course. They do have a couple of javelins in them, which is useful, but like I said, it's one of those things that can be a little bit deceptive in my opinion. Like, yes, it's useful, but it's not quite as useful as you might expect. There you can see the artillery pieces already firing, and it is interesting because they can snipe out the trebuchet crews relatively easily, I think, with standard shot catapult fire. And if they can do that, the trebuchet is one of those tools that you really want to try and get rid of from the defender's repertoire if you can help it, because if you don't, these choke points are perfect for the trebuchet to really do some heavy damage. But the catapult seems to be making a bit of a meal of this so far. It's actually missing a fair few of its shots. I'd imagine something similar is probably happening over here on the front with these trebuchets, as Why Are We Playing Rome on Med's army starts to move forward, as does Mr. Sneakman's. It'll also be quite interesting to note when the Numenorian cavalry starts to spill forth from the forests. Trebuchet firing away as well. It'll be interesting to see what the trebuchet is actually going after. Is it going after the catapult, I wonder? It may very well be. Are they going after the trebuchet as well? So yeah, definitely going after, I think, the artillery, the defending artillery, at least in the first section of this battle, the Numenorian stuff. And I would definitely do that if I were the Rohirrim, because the catapult fire standard shot, you're not going to be able to do a huge amount of damage to infantry with that. It will still be not insignificant, but far better would be to try and deny the Numenorians the use of their artillery, because the trebuchets could be devastating to vast amounts of the Rohirrim here, which is absolutely not the thing you want to be happening. Rohan will already have their work cut out to try and survive a lot of the Numenorian arrow fire, let alone artillery fire as well. One of these catapults has been destroyed, actually. Interesting to see a trebuchet sniping out one of the catapults that's on the attack. Not sure if I would be using the trebuchet for that, to be honest with you. I guess he feels as though he doesn't have much of a choice, otherwise eventually he's going to lose his artillery anyway. In come these Mark Spears. So Engsvitz, it looks as though, is going to be the first one to make it to this part of the war. You can see as well over here the Helmingas sort of probing the lines. Steel bows will not be baited into a skirmish fight with them, but they might have to be, honestly. The Riddermark archers already firing away, and I would imagine excuse me, yeah, they're getting shot. I mean, the problem here that the steel bows have is, yes, they're heavily armoured, yes, they have that shield value from wearing that shield on their back, but they are being shot still, and this will still have an impact at some point. If they don't want to use them in a skirmish fight, they should probably retreat them down off this dirt wall. These fences getting in the way just a little bit. In come the Eastmark Spears, and Eclipse will have to meet them in battle at some stage. Arrows being spilled forth. Narun and Arrow Guard getting a good shot on them as they cross into the Numenorian fortification, or Roman fortification if that's the way you want to look at things. The Eastmark Spears are getting into position. I mean, this might be a good chance to see how much damage these javelins actually do. I mean, they will get a couple of kills here on the Numenorian cohorts, I think. No, all of them are getting back up, I think. There's one dead man. 2. I mean, this is probably the best use for the Eastmark Spears. They don't have a huge amount of ammunition, but I mean, they will be able to do some damage at least to the Numenorian cohorts. And it will also force the Numenorians to actually shoot their ammunition into Eastmark units, which they probably won't want to do. They probably want to save that for stuff like their Helm's Hammers, when it comes to stuff like their Seafarers, or even stuff like the Westmarks when it comes to using their arrows, because Rohan, of course, they don't have the most heavily armoured core among the human kingdoms. Riddermark Spears moving downwards. Seafarers and Damos are also over here. Numenorian cohort. I mean, again, like, the quality of the Numenorians on display today is very high, of course. Rohan are not bereft of quality themselves on the field today, but it's one of those matchups where Rohan, like, their lower tier units are really going to struggle to make any kind of impact at all. They're going to have to adopt an almost orc-like mentality here, where they try and swamp forward with numbers and have a little bit of quality interspersed throughout and hope that that's enough, and also don't subject themselves to some of the really nasty killing fields that Numenor could subject them to, but that's obviously easier said than done. I think some good play here from Engsfits to try and whittle down some of the Numenorian cohorts. I did spend the army introduction phase as saying why I'm not really the biggest fan of the Eastmark Spears, but this is one of the situations where they have actually been used to good effect here on the Numenorian cohorts. I can feel my voice starting to give out already, which is not a good sign in a 50k plus battle, but let's hope that things, that my powers don't abandon me. Numenorian steel bows are firing, and this is actually maybe a little bit less of a great idea from Engsfits, because the Helm's Hammers are in full view of the Numenorian steel bows, and while they're really good at absorbing standard arrow fire, the steel bowmen are armour-piercing arrows, so you can see that they have taken losses, so they definitely want to stay away from the steel bowmen. You could actually say that all of the good work he did with his Eastmark Spears has been completely wiped out there by committing his Helm's Hammers too far forward into the clutches of those AP arrows. But still, definitely definitely a slow burn early on in this fight, which is perhaps to be expected. The Rohirrim can't afford to be too gung-ho, because if they are, they'll subject themselves to these choke points, and that's exactly where Numenor are going to be really strong. So Rohan definitely need to spend a little bit of time setting up the assault. Oof, this is going to be pretty nasty over here. Adunheim Shadowbows have got just the perfect shot along the sides here. It's going to be very difficult, I think, for Mr. Sneakman to get through there, because those Adunheim Shadowbows are going to be able to rack up a humongous kill count for themselves. Down come the Rohirrim. Not exactly the lightning strike I was hoping for from Rohan as they get down off this hill, and to be honest with you, Numenor could punish them for that. An Aruna Royal Guard might be the ideal unit to do that with, because they're going to be able to shoot into the Rohirrim as they come down off their perch. And Rohan, of course, not exactly the best faction in a skirmish fight. This is the best unit for doing so, though, in the Helmingas. And they will return fire, but there's no way they beat the Naruna Royal Guard in a skirmish fight. It's a very one-sided affair, that. Humongous armour advantage, and shield advantage, actually, for the Numenorians. Now, here on this farmland, the Rohirrim are getting into position. You can see some fire arrows being flung over the wall from the other side. Over on this side, the Helmingas are firing, and they are going after the Numenorian steel bows as well. And this is the problem Numenor had, like I said. The Numenorian steel bows, they don't want to be baited into a skirmish fight. They don't have the ammunition to fire for that long, and their ammo is far too valuable to be used for such frivolous means. That's a good shot from the artillery, however. Nice shot from the trebuchet there, inflicting a good amount of casualties onto the Westmark spearmen as more of the Rohirrim come down here. Another decent hit there, primarily Eastmarks there that paid the price, I think, so not quite as significant perhaps, but still it gives the Rohirrim something to think about here. They're dawdling a little bit. They're trying to get more and more of their units down here off the high ground. I mean, the rules are the rules. You need to get your army down here, and, you know, drawing it out, to be honest with you, is only going to help Numenor in this situation. So I think they definitely need to sort of get their roll on here. Eastmark Spearmen over here trying to do the same thing that Engsfits did on the other side. It's a pretty decent effect as well. It will force Lango to move back with his Numenorian Shield Guard, which maybe gives them the opportunity to charge into the settlement. I think maybe there's just the main body of their army is lagging behind just a little bit, perhaps not wanting to subject themselves to the Numenorian steel bowmen just yet. Javelins, most of them avoiding the hill this time actually, so Lango may be giving them a slightly easier target if anything. Again, not humongous levels of casualties thus far, but still every little helps for the Rohan, and they're definitely going to need to soften Numenor up before they collapse down upon them and hope that their numbers can do the business. Eastmark Spearmen getting a little bit too close for comfort here, and Lango sensing that is going to chase them off, so a game of cat and mouse already erupting here. They could use the Balagar archers on the Eastmark, but I think Numenor, they really want to conserve their archer ammunition here, which is wise perhaps. It's going to be quite difficult for them to make this work though, because Rohan can effectively freely probe with units like this, and Numenor are going to have to hope that they can't do the damage that they want, I think. Again, decent amount of connections there with the Numenorian cohort, so Eclipse being subjected to such things once again. And we do have a melee fight actually, as Engsvit's charging in, trying to take advantage perhaps of the fact that there isn't really a hugely prepared front line over here. Seafarers of Nindamos are doing their thing. They are of course much more damaging than Eastmark Spears, both at range and in melee. So this is going to be a bit of a problem for the Rohirrim, but numbers wise Rohan have got the opportunity here to flood in. Eastmark Spearmen, and again this is the slightly depleted unit of Numenorian cohort. Eastmark Spears moving in, the Riddermark Axemen are also over here. Their armour piercing will be absolutely invaluable to Engsvit's effort to try and make some lasting progress here. Inarius also pushing in. I mean, this is a good opportunity I think actually to try and make some real gains against Eclipse, because you have to remember they don't necessarily need to beat the Romans within their fortifications. They can play this like they just do some critical damage to the Numenor forces and then pull back to the defences at the top there. What was that? That was, I think, a lucky hit more than anything here on the Adunheim Shadow Bows, but they'll definitely take that. The fact they know where they are if they're paying attention is pretty valuable as well. Oof. Again, just a shot into the Riddermark Spears. I mean, it's a hit, but it's maybe not the level of hit they were hoping for. Numenorian Shield Guard taking some hits there as well from the Eastmark Spears. So I have to say, actually, Rohan have played the early game here reasonably well. You can see here getting shots from the rear as well, where their shields are not coming into effect from the archers on the other side. So good synergy. I think Rohan are working quite well with one another at this point in time. I do still believe the Numenor quality, when things really get underway, will start to even that out a little bit. But this is what Rohan need to do, because they're not going to be able to outmuscle Numenor in this sort of situation. It's not going to happen. So they definitely need to take advantage of whatever they can. Interesting, so some Westmark Marshals are coming forwards. Eastmark Spearmen are going to struggle, of course they are, against Numenorian cohort. There's some Narina Royal Guard. I think they will probably need to hope that, you can see over there that the Rohirrim have been forced back in a fairly big way, and a large part of that was of course the Trebuchet firing in, fire arrows coming in, and more of Eclipse's army also being committed. So some good work initially from Engsvitz to sort of clear a gap, but then, unfortunately for him, Numenor then really started to flex their muscles and force him back out. That may also be the situation that befalls, or the fate I should say, that befalls Inarius over here, because he's got some Westmark infantry and marshals coming in, two very, very fine units. But Numenor are going to be able to counter with more reinforcements of their own, and I think the Trebuchet is going to be the main problem here. Belagai pikemen having some pot shots taken at them by the Riddermark archers from Engsvitz over there. Westmark infantry sort of worming their way in. If they can stop the Trebuchet from firing, then maybe the Axemen on the front line can do a little bit more damage. Are those Westmark Spearmen as well? They are, so I mean, this is a big committal here. That javelin shower coming in there from the Seafarers of Nindamos. I think they are going to be able to save the Trebuchet crew. The Westmark infantry trying their best, but they're immediately going to be countered by some Numenorian cohorts, and while I do quite like the Westmark infantry, the Numenorian cohorts are definitely the superior unit. Eastmark Spears moving in. I mean, you can see the Rohirrim over here. It's definitely going to behoove the outer armies as well to really start pushing in, of course. They don't want to give the Numenorians their minor victory condition too early, but this is also quite interesting. Lango pushing in with some serious numbers here, and I think, you know, yeah, this Trebuchet crew is actually being engaged on. which is not great for them because the trebuchet would have been an easy way, as we saw on the other side, to start routing off some of the weaker Rohirrim units, and Eastmark spears and Riddermark spears not exactly the last word in quality. The Riddermark spears are okay, but not exactly world beaters, and a trebuchet volley at close range is probably going to be enough to rout them, if we're being honest. We can also see a bit of an assault coming in over here as well, just making sure that Lango can't commit all of his units to stop Viper Action's push. Just some Eastmark Axemen going up against the Numenorian Shield Guard. Units being knocked over there, I'd assume, by Eastmark Spearmen. Just a minor committal of Eastmark units so far, but that's enough for now to cause some problems. This, however, I mean, Inarius is definitely going all in. I mean, Helm's Hammers and Westmark Marshals represent a lot of AP that Numenor will probably be fairly concerned about, to be honest with you. I mean, you can see they have turned around with their Nirona Iroh Guards of Fire in here, so any unshielded units, the Riddermark Axemen, I should say, and the Westmark Marshals are going to struggle there. Helm's Hammer's also going to get targeted by Seafarers of Nindamos, so Numenor definitely have all of the range supporting tools to try and blunt this large assault from Inarius, but still, it's something they definitely need to keep an eye on. Eastmark Axemen and some Eastmark Spearmen, so again, some of the lower tier. Oof. Again, some of those Rohirrim catapults hitting in, but without the use of Flaming Shot, that's not going to be quite so devastating as it could otherwise have been. Lots of Eastmarks moving in to put pressure on this depleted unit of Numenorian cohort. Another unit of Numenorian cohort heading towards the front line. More artillery strikes hitting the Seafarers, but again, nothing too deadly. 1 or 2 units dying per hit. And as long as they still have ammunition, that's not going to be too much of a concern for them, to be honest with you. Seafarers going to be moving in. Probably out of ammunition at this point because they have been firing for a little while and they don't have the most ammunition, as most Numenorian skirmishers don't. Seafarers of Nindamos will be pretty decent in melee in this situation as well. You know, their higher damage from those axes will actually be pretty good against what, you know, especially the basic units that Rohan have to offer. Shield Maids of Rohan, however, are here. They will offer pretty good support as well. Any time they hit one of those Belagaya pipes, it's going to result in a kill, you would imagine. Definitely a bloody fight so far. Westmark units being committed forward, so some Westmark Spearmen heading toward the front line, as are the Helm's Hammers. Only 22 of them. In and amongst some of the more regular rank and file Numenorians, those hammers will do a lot of damage. Shield Maid's moving in, so yeah, Engsvit's committing in a fairly big way. And I have to say, the Rohirrim, not backwards and coming forwards here in most situations. It's here in the middle that they haven't committed just yet. And I can certainly see why, because that's definitely some nasty choke points that are more easily defensible as well. Obviously these Eastmark units are going to be relatively easily dealt with by these Numenorians on the front line, but just engaging in multiple areas forces the Numenorians to spread their strength out. But you can see, counter-pushing once again. As soon as Numenor really commit to a fight, they are able to stabilise things against a lot of the more basic Rohan units. I mean, there are Riddermark Axemen on the front line, but again, the sheer quality of Numenor has proven to be a problem. But they are taking losses here, Numenor, and that's the thing that will probably slightly concern them at this point in the battle. Yes, they still have a decent army left, but there's a lot of Rohirrim to still cut their way through. And they've definitely taken some losses, not insubstantial losses at this point in the battle. Not so much over here. Eastmarks, like I said, without stronger units to support, stuff like the really low end Rohirrim are really going to make no difference at all. Very little impact on a fight. In come the Helm's Hammers now, pushing in, getting in and amongst the Seafarers, and immediately Inarius is pushing forward to support them with some Westmark Spearmen as well. I like this. You do often see a push happen and then nothing sort of to follow through on it. This is not the case here, so Rohan are actually making some headway here. You can see Mr. Sneakman's army is still just sort of waiting out there, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Seafarers and Nindamos getting some arrows flung their way. I do think Eclipse is... well, this half of the settlement is definitely where Rohan have made more inroads. I think Inarius and Engsvitz have been more aggressive in general, so you'd expect that. But also they have managed to find gaps in places. I think Engsvitz probably needs to send forward some more support if this attack is to continue. It's mainly made up of Eastmark units, to be honest with you, and the amount of pressure coming their way from the Numenorians is going to be far too great without reinforcements. They are sending forward now. I mean, Riddermark archers are not really what would be hoped for, I think. But Exfis has probably also got the most depleted army at this point. And Eclipse is sending forward some Naru and Aru Sentinels to help hold the line. Yeah, like they could end up being cut off here, some of these Rohirrim units. I don't think the Riddermark archers are going to be enough to stop that, to be honest with you. I mean, one of the trebuchets finally does fall, but they, again, one of them is still active, and again, one shot into some of the weaker units you would imagine would be enough to incite some routing, especially seeing as this fight is fairly heavy. Unfortunate, they were about to fire, so that is a bit of a boon, to be honest with you, but now the cavalry has been activated. You can see it here, the Numenorian cavalry charging towards Engsvitz. Definitely the right target, I think, because Engsvitz is the most depleted army, it's the most scattered, and I don't think he's going to have, I mean, he does have some spears still, but he's not going to be able to prevent this charge from coming in, and these siege engines are going to be prevented from doing their thing. The Pharazim Nobles and the Alcarondas Faithful, of course, very strong melee cavalry units, certainly too strong for something like the Riddermark cavalry to engage in, really, but may not have much of a choice here. This might be the end of Engsvitz's army, to be honest with you, if nothing happens. Westmark infantry. This might be the thing he was waiting for, to just commit everything into the choke point and put a single unit of spears behind to prevent him from being rear-charged. He may have waited just a little bit too long to do that, though, and the Alcarondas Faithful charging into the Westmark infantry. I mean, the saving grace here is that these units are melee cavalry, primarily, so the charges, while they will still be significant, they won't be absolutely world-destroying for Engsvitz, as it would be, for example, if the roles were reversed and some Sons of Eorl were coming in. Westmark infantry being relentlessly pursued by the Numenorian vanguard. Yeah, he definitely needs to get all of his units in there, I think. Medicel Guard are here, as are the Shield Maidens, but yeah, I mean, at this point he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. I would personally just commit into the choke point and put a single unit of spears behind, because while you may end up getting shot, getting charged like this, you're not likely to get too much done. I mean, Pharazim Nobles charging into the spears, charging into the rear as well. Not much in the way of damage, to be honest with you, and they do want to retreat from this fight against the spearmen, if they are able to. Alcarondas Faithful coming in, and yeah, it does look as though Engsvitz concurs with my assessment. He's going to do the thing. Riddermark cavalry charging in. They're up to charge speed. They will get a charge. Interesting to see how many kills they get from that, actually. I mean, obviously they're thoroughly out. Yeah, they did actually get a good amount of damage done there. So again, that armor-piercing charge from Lancers proved to be very useful. I mean, they will pay the price now, but that's about as good as could be expected from the Riddermark cavalry, to be honest with you. So very, very well done, I would say. I don't know if they actually have any spears left. I mean, they're trying to go after this Westmark or Numenorian vanguard coming in, trying to charge in. Then again, that was a pretty weak charge, but let's have a little look at what's going on elsewhere on the battlefield. Inarius' assault, I think, has been thrown off, which there was a certain inevitability to that. He pushed a fair way into the settlement, but there was only so much in the end I think he was going to be able to do there. And now he might actually be looking towards preserving his unit so he can fall back to the settlement on the hill later on. Over here, meanwhile, Viper Action also trying to push in through the middle. Some Eastmark Axemen and Westmark Spearmen. Again, not the level of quality you're going to need to smash through a combined arms Numenor front line like this. Doing their best, though, I'm sure. Mr. Sneakman starting to move forward. So Medicel Guard, I mean, they will do a lot of damage to something like Numenorian Shield Guard, and again, it might be worth their while to do so. Free damage, Numenor not responding to it. I'd probably take that. Meanwhile, getting the carcasses of the trebuchets in the way. Well, maybe not intentionally, because this is a broken one, so I'd imagine that who I assume is Blindness is able to do the business there. Still struggling to get in through here, Viper Action. He's managed to do some good damage to the Seafarers of Nindamos with his axe throwers. But again, a bit of a... whoever wins over here, it'll be a bit of a Pyrrhic victory. I think the Numenorians would probably accept that, however, because they're doing quite well on the other side of the field. The Trebuchet continuing to fire. Another unit of Westmark Spearmen moving forward. So some slightly stronger units being committed in. Helmingast that are out of ammunition, but still, the quality of Numenor is unyielding, and Rohan unable to prove victorious here. Let's see, are they going to shoot point blank, or are they going to go after the catapult? Point blank it was, but unfortunately a miss. It was just a little bit too close in the end. What have we here? Medicine Guard have pulled back after taking a few pot shots. Mr. Sneakman still taking it easy. Inarius moving in with some of Viper Action's units again. I don't really feel as though they're going to make much headway here. But it is another area that the Numenorians are going to have to try and cover. You can see a lot of damage has been done over here, but Numenor still stand firm. Rohan now moving back out of the choke point after the cavalry has backed off just a little bit. So Numenorian Vanguard still over there. Shield Maids of Rohan continuing to do their thing. Again, against most pikes, they're probably the best unit to be using, but not so much actually against the Numenor Sentinels, because of their heavy armour and their shields together mean they can actually resist that damage better than most. But you could still argue that it's probably one of the better units you can go after because of how good they are, and any kills you can get would be a big thing. Shield Maiden's often such a effective unit. Looks like they're out of ammunition now though, pulling out their swords. But the lack of AP means Numenor, again, can probably resist their damage better than most. This is interesting. Eclipse sallying out, seeing a bit of an opportunity perhaps. Now though, I think the retreat is going to be sounded. These units here are going to be doing their thing. The artillery that's up on the hill can only use standard shot, but it's going to cover the retreat and do some damage to the units that Eclipse is sending to try and hunt this down. So from now, the outer assault is going to be on its own without any support from the inner assault, which that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because I would imagine that means that the Romans are heading towards at least a minor victory here, because I can't see the outer assaults gaining much ground now, especially not without some support from the other side. It wasn't a fully unified attack on this fortress, I have to say, from the Rohirrim. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't perfectly executed either. But the army that's outnumbered often needs to depend on that a little bit. I'm not so sure if that's the case this time, with the sheer quality on display from the Numenorians. Fire arrows coming in from the Belagai are going to try and break the Rohirrim that are in here, and they may very well succeed. They're shaken, they're getting attacked on multiple sides by heavily armoured Numenorian Legion. It's going to be tough, I think. Have we over here Numenor Sentinels bracing. It's not as if the Rohan haven't done anything. They have inflicted some damage on Numenor. Whether it will be enough for them to be victorious up on the hill or not, I'm not sure. I should mention actually the Celtic victory conditions as well. Obviously the major victory is to be outright victorious in the battle, but the minor victory is to kill the central general, which I believe is Marshal of the Guards, which would be this gentleman over here. So I think this represents Caesar. If the Celts are able to destroy him, that is their minor victory condition, in the way that defeating all of the external armies is so for Numenor. And that brings about the end of that central assault. This is going to be tough on Mr. Sneakman. I think at this point he's got by far the most healthy army in the externals of the battle, but I mean he's going to get pincered by rangers and by javelins, and now on the outside he's going to have to deal with cavalry hitting his ranks. Those are Eastmark spearmen, but they're relatively thinly spread, and you'd imagine that the cavalry should be able to push through here. Aelred of ALDBERG charging in. Not as impressive a charge as the Riddermark one, and of course in the prolonged fight they're going to be even more in trouble against Alcarondas faithful and Pharazim nobles. Aelred of ALDBERG now going out into the more open reaches of the field, going after the Riddermark spearmen, so another, again, relatively thinly spread unit of spears going to try to be exploited here by all of this cavalry as they continue to move in. And now they can start going after some of the more worthwhile targets, something like the Westmark Marshals. They can't afford to stay in melee with the Westmark Marshals, but a charge would not go amiss. Helm's Hammers as well. There's a lot of heavy axemen over here, which does mean that this cavalry does need to be a little bit careful perhaps. Or maybe they're going after Blindness's army. Again, I'm assuming this is blindness. It may not, maybe someone else entirely, but I mean, his army is more depleted. Perhaps a few more gaps able to be exploited. No, they're going to turn around, actually. Maybe try and go after the Aerid. There's the Riddermark cavalry. I mean, they're going to want to get away. Still alive, though. What warriors they are. Alcarondas Faithful thundering towards the line. Interesting to see the Medicel Guard breaking up the charge. I mean, if they've used up their ammunition, then fair enough, but they're a unit that you probably want for later on, because they're one of the few infantry units that Rohan have that can genuinely worry a lot of what Numenor have, along with the Helmshammers, of course, and the Westmark Marshals, but they were thrown in the way of a cavalry charge there. What's going on over here? I mean, Engsfitz is still alive. Medicel Guard still have ammunition. I mean, alive is relative. He has a depleted army. Oof. This is the problem now. Medicel Guard getting targeted by some Temple Guard, and they don't have a limited amount of ammunition either, in the same way that the Steel Bowmen have. So it's going to be painful. The terrain means they do have a little bit of cover, perhaps. Some nice javelin volleys into the Sentinels as well. I do like the way Engsfitz has played this, actually. He's had the deck stacked against him, and yet he's done a pretty good job, I have to say, of making his army do as much work as possible. Meanwhile, this army over here is trying to make headway, but still the Numenorians stand strong, and I think just trying to do as much damage as possible is the best way. Playing Rome on Med can contribute to his team's overall chances in this battle. This is a real problem though, because Mr. Sneakman, he's going to go down the central lane. The Rangers have actually left, but the Trebuchet is going to be a real issue if it parks itself here. He's doing a pretty decent job though of sort of making sure that he has a response to that. The Shield Maidens are here, and they could throw their projectiles in if need be. Trying to defend against that cavalry, but the cavalry, it's only the Alcarondas Faithful that are over here actually now starting to put pressure on this army, getting a decent charge there into the Westmark infantry. Farazim Nobles are also in the background over there, actually shaken. Rare to see a unit of their stout build shaken. I suppose they stayed in melee just a little bit too long with Heavy Axeman. Speaking of which, Nara and Ariel Guard are starting to fire at them. Pretty good target to go after, if I do say so myself. Another charge coming in, Eastmark Axeman breaking up the charge, which is probably not great for them. There goes Engsfitz's general. He's lived quite a long time, considering his army has been in a pretty shocking state of disrepair. Defeat seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Still some Shield Maidens. I mean, at this point we're getting... I mean, he still has some decent units left. He's got some Westmark Marshals, he's got some Helmshammers. He could still cause some problems for Numenor over here. Maybe not outright win, but definitely enough to make sure that Numenor need to keep some units here to meet that challenge. Westmark Infantry, Mr. Sneakman doing his best. There's some cavalry in amongst that. Not quite sure what they're doing here. They're not likely to provide much of a service at all with the Numenorian Shield Guard here. They'll die very quickly as soon as that anti-cavalry thrusting damage comes their way. But no matter. Nara and Ariel Guard maybe thinking of moving over to do some damage. Some routing Rohan units. Still the Alcarondas Faithful are in pretty good health though. Farazim Nobles I think were actually finished off, which is good. One down, one to go in terms of cavalry units over here for this army. Charging uphill. They did manage to get up to charge speed there, I think. But they need to get out of here because the Farazim Nobles learnt that you can't afford to underestimate the Riddermark Axemen in melee. And you can see that a few of them did die though. Like Heavy Axemen are no joke. Like unless you get like a really clean charge on them, it's definitely something you have to be worried about, even against more basic units like this. So that is another way in which Rohan can defend against cavalry. They may not have the most melee cavalry, but they have a lot of spears, they have a lot of Heavy Axemen. And those are tools in this battle which they're having to rely on quite heavily. Meanwhile, some Shield Maidens in here providing morale boost. Some Westmark units in there as well, but again, like the quality of Numenor, a unit of seafarers are going to be committed to the front line as well. It's going to be tough for them. More javelins. Is Engsfitz still alive, still fighting hard? Well, doesn't look like it. It looks as though we just arrived in time to see what remains of his army break, unfortunately for him. Numenorian Vanguard was also coming in and bothering his backlines as well, which goes a long way to explaining why Engsfitz has met the fate that he has. And now they're going to be run down by what remains of that Vanguard unit. And there goes Engsfitz. I know that Engsfitz isn't the biggest fan of sieges, and I doubt that his experience in this particular battle would have done much to change that course, but he did a pretty decent job, I would say. Like, considering the hand he was dealt, he did a pretty decent job. And that's all you can ask. He'll now have to hope that his team can do the rest. Nara and Aragorn are sideswiping Mr. Sneakman's force, and this is going to be a real problem for Mr. Sneakman, I think. This choke point is, I think, a little bit too set up for Rohan to fail. I mean, in real life, obviously, this is exactly what you'd want to do. You'd want to set up a funnel and shoot into the sides of the units as they push through. But I mean, from a game perspective, I feel as though this was a little bit too much for Rohan to have to deal with. Especially given the slanted nature. Like, that's the thing, I think. If it was perfectly flat, then it would have been a little bit more difficult to take advantage of, and I think that would have been, I think, a little bit more reasonable for Mr. Sneakman to have to deal with. But as it is, he can push forward as much as he likes, but he's just going to get hit by arrows, and that's not really going to... I mean, he's going to really struggle there. It's going to be hard for him. It's actually so bad that if I were Mr. Sneakman, I would completely ignore this choke point, to be honest with you. Completely deny the defenders the ability to actually use it properly. And I think early on in the battle, or earlier on in the battle, I probably would have split my army half and half. One to help out over here, one to go over and help out Engsfitz. I think that's how I would have handled the situation, rather than allow the defenders to use that rather unreasonable choke point, I think. Especially given that Rangers were there initially, so it could have been even worse. Helm's Hammers are on the front line. I mean, there's a pretty decent push in this, I have to say. A lot of AP damage. I mean, the Belagire archers are firing in, which is going to be a problem for a lot of the unshielded units, or at least some of the more lightly shielded units. What's this going on out here? Helmingas firing away. This is going to prompt Eclipse to try and move over and prevent this from happening. They're going to need to get out of here, otherwise Viper Action is going to have lost an entire unit of Helmingas, which would be incredibly useful later on, perhaps necessary for their victory later on. He's going to get out of here just in time, I think, as the Numenorians hunt them down. You'd expect it to be quite difficult to run after the Rohirrim, given the more heavily armoured nature of the Numenorians. Of course, it doesn't actually work that way. I think their speed is exactly the same, but still, Rohan's still pushing in, still trying to do their thing. The Numenorians feeling the bite of those axes. Arid of ALDBERG are out here, so still some Rohan cavalry. I think, and yeah, you can see over here they have hunted down what's left of the Alcarondas faithful, and now, through sheer numbers, the Arid of ALDBERG should be able to bring the Alcarondas faithful down. But you can see with every swing of the swords from the Alcarondas faithful, another one of the Arid is falling. Goes to show what monsters the Alcarondas faithful are in melee. There's one Pharazim noble left alive as well, actually. Oof, brutal. Holding on, actually, those cavalry units. Going to end up losing far more than he would like. You'd imagine off the charge they did quite a bit of damage, which is probably why the Alcarondas faithful is so depleted. Rohan doing a good job over here, though. This is a good opportunity for them to rack up a decent kill count for themselves. Nara Aru Sentinel's going to push in. Drop that phalanx. And that will probably be enough, to be honest with you, to stem this Rohan momentum. But like I said, these outer armies at this point, I think the minor victory conditions are going to be met here for the Numenorians, regardless of what happens from here. So I think what Rohan can hope to do here is simply inflict as much damage on the Numenorians as possible, because Numenor eventually are of course going to have to try and make their way up into that settlement over there, which is going to be tough on them, to be honest with you, because then the tables will turn and all of a sudden the Numenorians will have to subject themselves to trying to slog through a very nasty defensive position, which up until now of course they've been thoroughly enjoying the other side of that. How much will this AP be able to do? I mean, they'll be able to do some decent damage to stuff like the Numenorian steel bows, and sheer manpower may be what this battle ultimately comes down to in the end. We'll have to wait and see. Some routing units, very depleted routing units. Hayward of ALDBERG now retreating, so the cavalry finally has been thwarted, but it definitely did its job. When I say the cavalry has been thwarted, was there not a unit of Numenorian vanguard around here somewhere? Unless that was utilised earlier. There goes, again, who I assume is Blindness's general. Well, here is Eclipse's army, and he is now pushing out this side instead of the fortress, and he's going to try and attack Mr. Sneakman from the sides. Again, like, I can definitely see why he didn't come down here, Mr. Sneakman. But this is a good opportunity, actually. I mean, this, if I were him, what I would do is probably place like some defensive units here as a rear guard to prevent Marshal of the Guard from coming out and attacking, and move to try and overwhelm Eclipse's army over here. I think that would probably be the best way to go about things. Meanwhile, it does look as though finally Why Are We Playing Rome on Med's army has been laid low. He made some decent progress, but ultimately it was always going to be short-lived. And now, only one attacking army from the outside remains. There's still technically these guys, which, I mean, if these guys count towards the minor victory conditions, then sequestering them away over in this corner, I suppose, is worthwhile. Although I think they've been seen, because there's some Numenorians heading their way, which is not great. They're obviously going to be subjected to some pretty harsh treatment, I would imagine. Westmont Marshals are routing. There's nothing else, I don't think, from his army. So yeah, they have of course been seen, and so they may as well charge in. And they're of course just going to get overwhelmed very, very quickly. And there we go. Defeated, and that means the final external army, at the very least, is the only target that remains. Numenorian cohort and shield guard pushing out to maybe prevent what I would have done and move over to try and overwhelm Eclipse. Pushing out, engaging some of Sneakman's army. Shield maidens on the front line, presumably out of ammunition. Some Riddermark archers as well, definitely out of ammunition. And they of course will be no match for the metal-clad Numenorian legions. What have we got going on in here? What is the plan here? Because of course it's going to be true from the other side as well. Layo can send out an expeditionary force as well to try and overwhelm, and I think Sneakman concurs that he, at this point, he needs to commit quickly in one direction to try and make something of his army, and so he is going to move forward and try and do some damage to Eclipse. I mean, the Temple Guard are on the very front line, which is an interesting place for them to be. I mean, with a few volleys into the right targets, I think actually they bottled it there. They're instead now going to retreat. Eclipse cancelled their order just a little too early, because he could have got at least one volley off there. But again, Eastmark Axemen moving in, trying to leverage their numbers here. And this could be an important engagement, because they need to do more damage to the Numenorians here, Rohan. And Mr. Sneakman could be the difference here between a major victory and a major defeat for Rohan. Numenorian Shield Guard defeat is a distinct possibility. Rolling in as well are the Numenor Sentinels. They're going to be a bit of a problem. They're going to have to be overrun rather than straight up beaten in a fair fight. Numenor Royal Guard, heavily armoured, heavily defensive. If Rohan have any of their armour-piercing tools still available to them, they definitely need to be used on units like that. In come the Riddermark Axemen. Are they going to be going after Seafarers of Lindamos? They may very well be. They're going to be charged in there by the Numenorian Vanguard. That's going to hurt the Riddermark Axemen because that was a good charge. The spears were down. But they take some good damage in return as well. But it's something I think Eclipse will probably take at this point in time. Temple Guard. Eclipse surrounding this unit of Eastmark Axemen and doing the business. In comes some Westmark Infantry. And I don't think it's going that well for Mr. Sneakman at this point. I think because at this point with Lango encroaching on his space, he hasn't been able to overwhelm Eclipse with everything he had. That's an interesting choice. Charging. A frontal charge into pikes with his cavalry. This may just be him throwing himself upon his own sword. In come the Helm's Hammers. I mean, the Helm's Hammers are going to be able to do heavy damage to something like Numenorian steel bows. That. Yeah, the Dunheim Shadow Bows. So now with the Rohirrim bottled up, this is where the Rangers reveal themselves. More Riddermark Axemen coming in. I mean, this is where Rohan can do the damage, and it is where they are doing the damage, in fact. Even stuff like the Eastmark units are getting a pretty decent return for themselves. Westmark Spearmen are moving in, Numenorian Shield Guard a little bit scattered. The Numenor Sentinels over here are out of formation and getting picked apart. So the fate of Eclipse's army here may be a little bit grisly. There are the Royal Legion of Armenelos getting chased by Riddermark Axemen. Only the first ranks of them though. Again, one of those eccentricities that Med 2 has. Evenly matched. I mean, I have to say, considering the situation, he hasn't done too badly here, Mr. Sneakman. It's a very similar situation to his two fellow armies in the external bits of the settlement. I think they've done what they can, considering the situation. Belagair archers moving in. 2 out-of-ammo arch units being used on the Helm's Hammers. Over here, meanwhile, yeah, the Rangers continuing to do their thing. A lot of Numenorians still waiting. Royal Legion of Armenelos pushing in, so Rohan don't have much time left to try and do the business here against Eclipse's army, but Eclipse still has some elite units, including some Armenelos Legion of his own, and some Temple Guard over here. So it's going to be quite difficult to finish Eclipse off entirely, but I do think a good amount of damage has been done to his army. We shall have to wait and see if that's enough. It's a nice defensive position that the Rohirrim occupy up on that central hill. I'm not sure whether it's going to be enough to save them here. Royal Legion of Armenelos, Eastmark units starting to rout. The Rohan numbers over here doing their thing. Numenor Sentinels still a little bit scattered. Riddermark units and Eastmark units taking advantage of their numbers advantage and their positional advantage. Royal Legion. Belagair archers are over there. Numenorian Vanguard just charging in. Riddermark Axemen routing off. I think, yeah, Eclipse is still going to have units left. Lango's units are obviously getting into supporting positions now. Another unit of Royal Legion of Armenelos are there. But, decent damage done. I think the tale of Rohan's exploits here in the external areas of the map could have been better, but it could also have been worse. Damning with faint praise, I suppose that is. Riddermark Axemen are going to try and get across here to prevent the Seafarers from firing away. Although I think their ability to do that is going to be somewhat limited. They're going to try and get around and surround, actually, the Royal Legion of Armenelos instead. And there goes Sneakman's general. And that will pretty much be that for the outer settlement. Shield Maidens are routing, Westmark Infantry are routing, the Helm's Hammers will probably stand and fight to the bitter end, but there's not really very many of them left. And then over here, Riddermark's fleeing. Westmark Marshals getting shot in the back, which is obviously going to be their Achilles heel. They're also being attacked by pikes, so what is actually an effective unit against Numenor has been effectively diffused there. Westmark infantry are routing. And that is pretty much that. Mr. Sneakman's army has been completely destroyed there, so the minor victory condition has already been met by Numenor. But there is still more to come, because they still need to try and take the town at the top of the hill to gain their major victory condition, and in so doing they could grant the Celts both their minor and major victory conditions, so it's not over yet. But so far so good for Numenor. There's still a few units here on the front line, some Medicell Guard from Mr. Sneakman, which will fight to the bitter end. And it will be a bitter end, because they're going up against the Farazim nobles, and as good as the Medicell Guard are, they're no match for them. Especially as depleted as they are. But yeah, I have some sympathy for Mr. Sneakman there, because that is a very unreasonable choke point to be expected to take. Which is probably why he actually held back. Like I said, if that was the case, I probably would have split my army to try and go down one of the two sides. It would have concentrated the force a little bit more, which can also help the defenders, but I don't know. It maybe wouldn't have made that much of a difference in the end, to be honest with you. Medicell Guard are fighting pretty hard, though. Definitely not going quietly into that good night. They're probably putting on a better last stand, actually, than the Helm's Hammers, which maybe makes a little bit of sense. Helm's Hammers, armour-piercing units in general, trade in a bit of melee defence for their AP abilities. In come the Narin Arus. Defeat seems certain. I think a big part of the problem here and why they're not dying as quickly as maybe they would like, because a lot of them are actually going up against stuff like Belagaya Pikes, which are going to take a long time to kill off Medicell Guard. There are the brass-clad Temple Executioners with the armour upgrade. Even with the armour upgrade, no match for the third hit point on the Farazim nobles, of course. But yes, there go the Medicell Guard. And I will actually make a bit of a cut here, because I think it's going to take a little bit of time for the Numenorians to reorganise their army into a position to start attacking Alessia itself. So, I'll make a cut, and we'll rejoin when the final phase is underway. So, here we go, the final phase of this battle is now underway as the Temple Guard get into position and start firing some of their armour-piercing projectiles downrange, thudding into the front of the Westmark infantry. They still have some artillery, and to be fair, Rohan, while there is still a lot of quality on display from Numenor, they've got some decent tools of their own. They've got quite a few units of Westmark Marshals. They still have some Shield Maidens. Westmark infantry is going to be decent at holding the line. They still have civilians, which of course is a bit of a crutch for them. A little bit of an issue, because obviously they're not going to be able to offer much, but that was part of the rules. The civilians had to stay within this area. And they've got some Medicell Guard, some Riddermark Axemen and Westmark infantry as well. So this is a situation where throughout most of this battle, Numenor were able to enjoy the superior skirmishing positions with their javelins and their archers. The shoe is now on the other foot, because Rohan are now going to be able to do that instead. But it's still going to be very difficult for Rohan here, because they're already on the back foot a little bit, and in terms of sheer melee might, they're going to struggle against most of what Numenor will have left. So they're definitely going to have to use their ammunition almost flawlessly, I would say, if they are to come out on top here. And obviously civilians are really just going to be there as a meat shield. Lango's Numenorian cohort trudging up the hill, getting ready to commence the attack. Civilians charging forward. I mean, they could overwhelm this unit of Numenorian cohort, I suppose. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. There's some steel bows in there as well. But somehow I doubt it. I feel as though these civilians are being sent forward to die with their shovels and their pitchforks. Here come the Westmark infantry. The Numenorians beginning the assault over on this side as well. Again, committing their more depleted units first and foremost. This obviously isn't going to be the hammer blow that Rohan will be expecting, but as the intensity of this final phase is turned up, we will get there, I'm sure. Stuff like the Farazim Swordmasts, I mean, they're something that Rohan are absolutely going to need to use something like the Medicell Guard on, because they don't stand a chance in pure melee. Unless they're fully surrounded by Westmark Marshals, maybe that would work, but that's going to be difficult in this situation. There are the Shield Maidens. I mean, this is where, obviously, Numenor, up until this point, this is the sort of thing they've been doing to Rohan, so it's a good sense of catharsis, I suppose, if nothing else for Rohan, that now that they are able to do this to Numenor. Out of ammunition, Helmingas also being committed forward to commit as well. Catapult not able... Actually, no, the Catapult is using Flaming Shot. I wonder if that was in the rules. Maybe as part of the game, as it went on, it was decided that Rohan... Maybe you can use the Flaming Shot, because it will probably make for a more interesting final stand. And I agree, it does give Rohan another potent tool which they can use to try and turn the tide here. Flaming Arrows... I mean, this sort of thing was very effective against Rohan. Rohan's morale is sort of average, I would say. You know, it's nothing too special. Numenor's morale, on the other hand, is very good, so it's going to be slightly more difficult to rout them, but they are overwhelmed on the front line in terms of numbers, so maybe, especially in conjunction with some flaming catapult boulders, maybe they could try and rout off these forces. Seafarers and Nindamos climbing up. I mean, this is a punishing climb for Numenor, but again, that is only fair considering what Rohan had to go through earlier on in the fight. Shield Maidens have stopped firing. Rohan continuing to hold the line over here, more through sheer numbers than quality. Westmark, Spearmen and Helmingas are okay in melee, but obviously the Numenorians are significantly stronger, so it is through numbers they're primarily doing their thing. These Helmingas are getting shot from further down the hill from the Numenorian archers, but they're also giving as good as they get, the Helmingas. Those fire arrows hitting their marks. Riddermark Axemen are on the front line over here alongside Westmark Infantry, which is, in terms of dealing damage, significantly stronger than on the other side. That armour piercing alone is a big deal. Seafarers of Nindamos trying to do their thing. They won't be able to kill off the catapults with that, I don't think. Too many of the javelins will simply hit the artillery pieces rather than the crew themselves, which is what you'll need to do. A lot of these arrows are being buried into the side, which, as I said, they might need to use all their ammunition flawlessly to win this, the Rohirrim. So to see a lot of their ammunition go down the drain like that could be a bit of a problem, but they are at least hitting the Seafarers of Nindamos as well, getting some kills, perhaps worrying Numenor a little bit. Because again, Numenor don't exactly have a limitless supply of manpower here, and this defensive position, they have a little bit more over here, I would say. Then also the Medicel Guard are over on this side. More Numenor reinforcements being sent up, more Belagai units being committed to the front line, but I think they need a little bit more quality actually on the front here. Eventually as well, of course, they may have to commit the representative of Caesar himself, which I believe, well, he's way back over there, he will be the last one committed in, so it may be that the minor and major victory conditions could come all at once for Rohan if they are able to achieve them. This catapult, I don't know how much ammunition it has left, but I mean, look at that, a trail of dead Royal Legion there, so definitely a worthwhile pick. Also, I mean, they were covering the retreat earlier, so they won't have absolutely full ammunition. Javelins being flung from a long way away, you have to say. Actually, no, those are armour-piercing missiles. Numenorian steel bows trying to do their thing. I mean, when they hit, they have a good chance of actually killing a unit. They're going after Westmark Marshals as well, so that's a good choice. Good armour for Rohan standards, but the shields, of course, being worn on their back mean that's not quite as significant. And armour-piercing arrows are a different breed anyway. But still, fighting around these trees on this path up to Alessia. And we're into the final 10,000 frames, more or less, here. And this could still go either way, I have to say. The defensive position is doing a lot of heavy lifting for Rohan. And Numenor, could it be that their dominance they've shown throughout the initial phases of the battle, could it all be for naught as they try to take the settlement itself and are thrown back by the Gauls? I've been really mixing and matching Romans and Numenor and Celts / Gauls and Rohan in this fight to a frankly very confusing degree, but such as this battle is. Numenorian steel bows moving in, piling on the pressure. Still some range support down at the bottom of the hill from Numenor. Some Naran Iron Guard. Those Temple Guard, I think they do still have some ammunition. Cohort. Balagai Pike's still here, so yeah, they still have units available to push forward. I mean, this is a significant Numenor push now, and I think in trying to reposition their catapult, they may end up losing it here if they're not careful, Rohan. Because I still think, I mean, that catapult, it might only have a couple of shots left in it, but that could be absolutely vital. Medicel Guard getting hit by javelins. Seafarers of Lindamos are down there. A big problem as well is going to be the Naru and Aru Sentinels. Rohan don't have a phalanx unit of their own, of course, in general, and not in this battle either. And the Naru and Aru Sentinels are some of the deadliest phalanx units in the business. And so it's going to be a real problem to try and deal with them. And of course the normal way Rohan deals with phalanx units, with shield maidens and the like, not going to be as effective against the heavily armoured and fully shielded Sentinels. Speaking of the shield maidens, they just added their own might to the front line. Temple Execution is still further down. Again, they still have those heavy swordsmen that can be committed here. Numenor. Westmark Infantry. I mean, it's still a very even fight. It's going to be a big grind here toward the finish. Still have Westmark Marshals, they still have a good amount of AP that can be committed. Medicel Guard, I don't know if they still have ammunition or what, but even if they don't, their ability as a powerhouse infantry unit is still going to be very important. But I don't know, I mean, the problem is going to be stuff like the Pharism Swordmasts and Temple Executioners can defeat them in melee, so it's not going to be enough. And I think Rohan have got too much to do here. There you can see the streaks of the Adunheim Shadow Bows. Again, when they're firing over targets like that, they're not going to be using their body-piercing projectiles to maximum effect because they're going to be hitting fewer units. But still. Numenorian cohort. The balance of forces is evenly matched. Evenly matched is all Numenor need, though, because I think they have more left in the tank than Rohan here, and I think we're going to be seeing a lore-friendly, although I guess that's the wrong way to look at it, a historically accurate ending to this. I think we're going to be seeing Caesar be victorious, and I think it's just going to come down to quality. Rohan just had a little bit too much left to do, and it wasn't a massive difference here. Like, Rohan could technically still, I mean, if the Medicel Guard have got full ammunition, if the catapult here has got a good few shots left in it, this could still turn around. So I'm not going to count my chickens before they hatch, but regardless of what happens, it's going to be fine margins by which this battle was decided by. Catapult firing, I mean, decent. I mean, it did hit Royal Legion of Armenelos. I mean, that's where the general is as well, so they could end up getting a minor victory here. That would be an interesting way to get a minor victory, wouldn't it? I think the major victory is going to be for Numenor, but they've got to be very careful with their general there, because I mean, it could. Well, the Medicel Guard, by the looks of things, do not have ammunition, so they're just going to be committed to the front line, try and hold on for as long as possible, which is fair enough. That may be all the catapult had left. They did some decent damage there, but not enough to turn the battle completely on its head. Rohan over here doing a pretty decent job on the front line. There's no phalanx units over here, which is probably helping matters quite a lot. Well, I say that. There's no phalanx unit just yet. Belagard pikemen on the way forward. More Naru and Aru units, which are just going to be so difficult to carve their way through, even with the huge amount of AP they have. And then, of course, there's the Pharism Swordmasters, which, if the going gets really tough, Numenor will, of course, commit. Westmark Marshals coming down. I mean, their AP will be a concern for Numenor, but like I said, I think it's one of those situations where you just get the sense that one side has given themselves just a little bit too much left to do based on the quality that both factions still have left available to them. The catapult is now back over here, trying to spread out its attention to both choke points, try and give them the best chance. Medicel Guard on the front line. A reasonably healthy unit of Westmark Infantry also helping to hold things down. Well, quite so. There's another a completely healthy unit of Riddermark Axemen over here which can be committed, and a unit of Westmark Marshals as well, but that's pretty much all they have left in reserve at this point. That's a nice hit. The catapult has been useful, and it has certainly helped to even things out a little bit. even if I don't think it's going to be enough. Can't have much ammo left in it either, which means its blessings are going to be few. Some ranger fire thudding into the back of this Rohan front line. And more, I mean, you can see as well, like, stuff like shield maidens on the front line, they're decent. Westmark infantry is decent. There's still some civilians in there, which is surprising, to be honest with you. Not so decent, but when you look at what Numenor have left at their disposal, it's going to be too much, you'd say. It's a lot of Westmark marshals, a lot of heavy axemen, definitely Rohan's best infantry tool against Numenor, but alone it's not going to be enough, and obviously it is the sort of battle like Rohan obviously prefer to have their cavalry available to them. So that is significant. Forward come the steel bows. Just committing forward everything they can to keep the assault going. I think actually we're going to go up to ×2 speed, to be honest with you. Going on further down. Balagai pikemen. They're going to trudge their way up the hill, are they? More civilians being committed forward, just more of an act of desperation at this point, to be honest with you. Rohan just trying to give as good as they can get. Potentially they can kill the general that they want to on that front line as well, but that's more of a matter of chance, I think, at this point, as to whether one of the Rohan can deliver, or one of the Rohirrim, I should say, can deliver a telling blow or not. The catapult, of course, could do so. That could be fairly devastating, actually. Have to do so quickly, though. Again, the classic medieval 2 siege problem where they start spinning on the spot rather than shooting their payload. Civilians routing. Down come the Westmark marshals. I think they really are going after that general, because over here, of course, they're ultimately going to be unsuccessful in their efforts. The Westmark marshals are doing their best. They're actually shaken over here, the Numenorians. Again, there's only so much I can say about a grind fest like this, to be honest with you. I mean, it is something that it's getting more and more difficult for me to commentate on siege battles, to be honest with you, because of this very issue. But it's something that's been prevalent forever, to be honest with you. It's just now my tolerance for it seems to be getting less and less. Riddermark Axemen coming across, they're doing their best here, but again, like, there's a certain inevitability about it. I mean, to be fair, Numenor are actually losing over here. I think they're being a little bit stingy with what they've got going on over here. They need the Pharazim Swordmasters forward, which I think they have committed at some stage. Indeed, they have. Rohan could win this, you know. Through sheer numbers. Those Nara and Aru Sentinels are needed badly on the front line because they're being overwhelmed at this point. If that catapult had just fired, had deigned to grace the Rohirrim with its firepower, perhaps they could have won, but that's not going to be the case, unfortunately, I don't think. As the fight continues, Temple Executioners being added to the front line. Over here, the catapult trying to get right up into the face of things. I mean, with Pharazim Swordmasters over here. Actually, the Riddermark Axemen are coming over here to try and help shore things up. It's very close, this battle, though, isn't it, in terms of the amount of troops that both sides have left. Has been an interesting battle where both sides had to attack into a really defensible position, but the damage done to the Rohirrim early on was obviously fairly substantial. And the quality Numenor had left was still substantial. Temple Executioners, I mean, I would probably throw the Nara and Aru Sentinels in at this point. There's nothing really you have that there's nothing you really have to fear, and that phalanx would definitely remove all doubt from the equation at this stage. 2,000 frames left. Yeah, and you can see here, especially like Riddermark Axemen, they're going to be no match for Pharazim Swordmasters on the front line. They're still backed up by a few phalanx units, some heavy spears, Temple Guard who are still alive, and obviously they have their part to play in melee. There goes one of the Rohirrim generals. Back down to ×2 speed for the final 1,000 frames of the battle. Yeah, this is the end for Rohan now, with the phalanx, with everything. front line has been overrun. I will say that it is quite commendable that Marshal of the Guard committed forward the general that if they died they would have given the Celts a minor victory condition. But in the end, the Celts weren't able to do that even, so the Celts failed to achieve either of their 2 victory conditions, whereas the Romans achieved both of theirs. So like I said, I believe that's a historically accurate way to end the battle. And Alessia falls into the hands of Numenor / the Romans. It's an interesting battle though, it's a very interesting concept and I like it. It was pretty well executed as well actually, considering I haven't seen...
by the victory we have won here today.
Considering I haven't seen this gentleman within 8%, so a nice close battle considering it was a 5v3. Considering I haven't seen him make a battle before, that was definitely, if that was a first attempt, that was a very successful one I have to say. And it'll be interesting to see if he does similar things in the future where he takes battles that happened in real life and apply a Middle-earth twist to them, because I'd definitely be happy to show more if this is the level of quality that we can expect. So let's have a little look at what did the damage. 214 on some Numenorian Shield Guard, 208 on some Pharazim Nobles, 317 on the Alcaron Less Faithful, so very effective cavalry, and several units breaking 100. So I believe that was Eclipse. This one, a lot of units breaking 200 actually, so Numenorian Shield Guard, Cohort, Rural Legion of Armenelos, Cohort, Seafarers, Naran Royal Guard. It does go to show the quality of Numenor relative to Rohan and the level of infantry they had. Numenorian Cohort getting over 400 kills. When a unit of upper mid-tier line infantry gets over 400 kills, you know what sort of battle they've been in, an ideal one for them. And a lot of units breaking, I mean there's barely a unit under 3 figures in this army actually. Only some Numenorian steel bows. Other than that, fantastic performances all around. Several breaking 300 as well. This is actually Eclipses, isn't it? Temple Guard, Royal Legion of Armenelos, yeah, really good performances. So yeah, obviously a huge advantage in terms of quality, but Rohan's numbers were nearly enough there to actually win this. So big thank you to Marshal of the Guard who sent this one to me. He has a different name on Discord, I believe it's Spirit of Thunder. But yeah, big thank you to you. I know you're the one who made this scenario, and if this is, if you're going to make more, I'll happily show them off, because this was definitely a very nice one. I like the map, I like the scenario, I like the sort of real historical battle with a Lord of the Rings twist to it. It's nice. It's something new, and Lord knows to keep me to keep my enthusiasm up, I do need new stuff, especially when it comes to Reforged. It's part of the reason why I'm grateful for Silmarillion's addition, to be honest with you, because it does give me something a little bit different that I can do in addition to Reforged. But yeah, let me know what you thought of this one, because I really liked it actually. I really liked the idea and the concept. Be interested to see what people thought of this in the comments. So big thank you to Spirit of Thunder / Marshal of the Guard, and big thanks to all the players who were involved. And obviously this was a lot of the usual suspects, because it was performed on the podcast channel on the Discord that Eclipse runs. So this was the battle for this time. And yeah, I think what's next, again, I do have that Moria siege, but it's really something I have to build up to, because I've done Moria quite a few times at this point, and just like, oof, I don't know, man. I don't know, it can be so difficult. Like, that's the thing, like, people, there are so many maps in the game that we never really get to see. People are so determined to play on the same ones over and over. You know, Bur-Sagath and Moria are 2 of the worst offenders for this. But yeah, it is what it is, I suppose. People will play what they will play. So Moria, maybe within the next week or so I will do. The next battle, though, will probably be one of the others that I was sent recently. Hrothgar has sent me a few battles, which I could certainly take a look at. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.